Hi there everybody, it's Steve Carson. We're here on the bow of the Vagabond. Another fantastic, almost record-breaking trip. I think the yellowtail fishing is even better. At 3 o'clock, they charge the boat. Hi there everybody, it's Steve Carson. It's the middle of July. Things are just going off. Fish are biting everywhere. If you're on a 4 to 8 day trip, sometime between this coming weekend and the end of October, it's just going to be off the hook, no pun intended. On the shorter trips, like the 4 day trips, you're still going to be catching a lot of bluefin tuna. Look at some of our earlier videos for a description of bluefin tuna jigs and some of the techniques to use. But also, hasn't been a lot yet, but we've now caught just a handful locally of yellowfin tuna. And they're a little bit more polite than bluefin tuna. They like to bite during the daytime. You can say that they're much more eager to bite, that they're not as smart as bluefin. Say whatever you want, but they are starting to show up. And if we get a good number of those guys in our local waters, it's gonna be Katie bar the door. And again, your 4 day type trips that have been only fishing bluefin, maybe a little bit of yellowtail, are gonna have an opportunity at yellowfin. Speaking of yellowtail, again, those 4 day trips, in the daytime, sometimes the bluefin bite in the day, sometimes they don't, but when they don't, the kelp patty fishing for yellowtail has been very, very good to exceptional. Some of it is what they call, kind of that kelp patty grade of yellowtail, those 8 to 12 pounders. Sometimes it's pretty legit nice fish, 14, 16, 18 pounds, and they pretty much bite anything. You can use your yo-yo jigs, your slow pitch jigs, your speed jigs, fly line baits, sinker baits, whatever way you want to do it, those yellowtail, they want to bite it. So be ready for both day and nighttime fishing. Again, the amount of caffeine that you overdose is going to be up to you. Now, my favorite fish in the whole world, the first ones were caught, actually 2 were caught just 2 days ago. The first 2 wahoo were caught in 8 day range. Now it's only 2, and it's the only 2 that were caught, but it's a predictor of action to come. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff on wahoo fishing, so if you have questions, specific techniques that you want us to cover, make sure that you put it in the comments, or wait till we do some of the wahoo stuff and then add what you think that we left out. So that is all common. But even if you don't get into the wahoo, if you leave in the next couple of days here, again, we're in the middle of July, you're going to get exceptional yellowtail fishing. I can't emphasize how good that yellowtail fishing has been. Whatever you want to do. Again, look at our earlier video, yo-yo fishing, fly lining, sliding sinker rigging, which we're going to hit here in just a few minutes. Surface iron, the surface iron fishing has been exceptional. If you like to fish for tuna, the yellowfin tuna haven't been quite as hot as they were 3 or 4 weeks ago, but they're still really good, and you can still pretty much catch as many as you want if you just put a little bit of effort in. They're biting the fly line baits on 40, sometimes if you're lucky they're biting it on 50 or even 60 pound tests, so make sure that you're ready to fly line for those tuna. They're also biting the lures of your choice, and they're biting the poppers, etc. So it's pretty hard to imagine better fishing that the 8 day trips are going to be having for the next call it a month, before all of a sudden the numbers of the wahoo start to move in and a lot of the effort gets moved to the wahoo. So, and if you haven't caught a wahoo, first of all, you have to ask yourself, why does it have that name? You can also think about what is the name on fancy restaurant menus. Ono. That means delicious in the Hawaiian language, and yes, they are. So that's going to be one that we're going to spend a lot of time on, but also everything from our local trips now, which we're not really going to discuss, to the 4 day trips, all the way up to the 8 day trips. Yellowtail are probably #1 right now, and all the captains are recommending a very specific rig, the sliding sinker rig. And I'm gonna try to show this to the camera. It's pretty basic. It's just a sliding sinker rig. That one happens to be 2 ounces, and a J hook. You can use circle hooks for yellowtail. J hooks are definitely better. That one happens to be a 2.0, which is kind of about the right size for sardines. You could move up to as big as a 4.0 with mackerel, and if you happen to be fishing locally with anchovies, you might have to drop all the way down to a 2. But like I say, that's a 2-ounce sinker. I'm just going to show you a 1 ounce, and you might want to have these as light as a 1/2 ounce to as heavy as 3 ounces because the amount of current, the amount of wind. Also, again, you may get into a bite, especially if you're on the longer trips where you have bonita or skipjack or something like that, biting your baits if they're all near the surface. So that sliding sinker rig is key. Also, you don't have to use the real heavy gear where you might catch a 100-pound tuna. What I've got here is, I know for the last how many years we've been saying 2-speed reels, 2-speed reels, 2-speed reels for tuna. For yellowtail, this happens to be a Penn Fathom star drag, 25 narrow. Again, star drag reels are always going to be single speed. And the way I have this, way I set up most of my reels is I fill it up 3/4 of the way with braid, and then on top I have 25 to 50 yard top shot of monofilament. In this case, I have 50-pound braid and 30-pound mono on top, because some of the time I'm going to be using 40-pound mono on top. When the yellowtail are not right in the structure, you can usually catch them pretty well on 30-pound line. If they're kind of back in the rocks or something like that, or they're right in the kelp, you may have to go to 40 to hold them out. Just about any live bait rod. This is basically my favorite to fish with 30-pound line, which is an 8-foot Carnage 3 rated 15 to 40-pound line. And as I repeat every time we talk about tackle, you want to get the middle of the line rating. You don't want the high end, you don't want the low end. So a rod rated 15 to 40 with 30-pound line is going to be absolutely perfect. Again, single speed reel, star drag, perfectly good for yellowtail, even for big ones. So if you've got that gear and it's been collecting dust in your garage, make sure it's cleaned off, has fresh line, lube it up, take it out, go fishing, catch a bunch of yellowtail. Now, speaking of yellowtail, search the previous videos. I can't remember what date it was that we did it, but about a month ago we did a fairly long video on dropper looping for yellowtail. And we covered quite a bit of stuff, and that particular one emphasized the really big yellowtail, the 40, the 50, the 60, the 80 pounders. There were a couple of tips that I wanted to hit. And also one little tip, I know it doesn't make sense when you're fishing with 80-pound test to use the word finesse, but you know, sometimes the bait isn't too good or the fish are just a little bit finicky, but you still got to use that heavy gear to hold them out of the rocks. So there's 2 important things that I wanted to talk about. And here is our, again, you're gonna have to look at the old video to find how we got to this point, because here we are with the sinker tied on, and we've got our dropper loop already tied, so I'm not gonna do that one again. But back in the day, these sinkers were only about 50 cents. Well, now they're $8. So you wanna be a little bit judgmental on this, but when you hook your biggest yellowtail of your life, you don't want your sinker to get snagged up in the rocks and lose your fish. So what I'll do is I'll tie what's called a sacrificial knot. It's literally just an overhand knot right there, just like that. And what happens is if the sinker gets stuck in the rocks and the yellowtail's pulling one way, you're pulling the other way, it's gonna break right there. And then that $8 sinker is gonna be gone, but you might land the biggest yellowtail of your life. Now, again, oxymoron, just like jumbo shrimp, is going to be finesse fishing with a dropper loop. And again, this is our 80-pound test with our dropper loop knot already tied. And ordinarily, if I was fishing for really big yellowtail, I would just use a 4-turn uni knot and tie a big old 8-0 or 9-0 hook on there. But what if the bait isn't too good? Or what if the yellowtail are right in the rocks, but they're only about 20 or 25 pounds? Or what if there's white sea bass mixed in with them? Now, watch carefully. Okay, here I got my clippers, and we're gonna clip. Sometimes if you look this up on Google, this is called a paternoster rig, and you just clip one leg just like that. And now you've got a nice, sort of long, single piece of line instead of a double. If your bait is weak, it has a little bit more room to swim around, etc., etc. But in the direct pull, if you happen to hook that 40-pound yellowtail, you've still got your full strength. The rock cod type dropper loop, which we never tie for yellowtail, the strength is this way. So that if a big fish pulls this way, that rock cod dropper loop will pull. But the surgeon's knot type of dropper, you can still clip one leg, give yourself a little leader, kind of like 2-pound test with power bait for trout, and possibly get a bite when the fish aren't biting otherwise. So that is my absolute final tip on dropper looping, because the next time we talk, I hope we're going to be talking about wahoo. All right, guys, get out there, catch them, and we'll talk to you on the water.